Let's talk some off the track news,
Mhm.
Rod. Something coming out, I guess, today, hinting that there may be some movement on the charter issue we've been talking a lot about on the podcast. What's the latest?
Well, the latest is that there may be the possibility this thing may finally be put to rest by the time they get to Atlanta this coming weekend. Sports Business Journal reported that NASCAR was hoping to have an agreement on a governing charter system with its Premier Series teams this week to avoid having the talk spill over into the playoffs, which of course start this weekend at Atlanta. And I didn't really pay that much attention to it at first, but we've been talking about this for almost 2 years. This
Yeah.
whole thing about this charter agreement, we've been talking about it for 2 years, and it's kind of shocking that it's gone on this long. But NASCAR feels like they've got to have a commitment. They've had to have a commitment to increase the amount of media rights revenue due, or at least the teams do, and that they receive. And they very, very much so sharply disagreed on a number of fronts. But the teams released the latest draft this past week at Darlington, and they are continuing to haggle over things of, much of a say teams will have over major competition related rules that NASCAR could make over the next coming 7 years from 2025 to 2031. And they're also saying, too, it's unclear whether a lot of the teams will ultimately stick together, sign at the same time, or it could be one of those holdouts and try to negotiate for better terms, which is a scenario that some in the sport are very leery of. They don't think it's a good idea for them to be thinking about doing a late negotiation toward the end of the season. So NASCAR's hoping to come away with something this weekend, and gosh, what a feather it would be in NASCAR's hat to be able to go and walk into Atlanta and say, we've got a charter agreement. Everybody's agreed upon it. Let's move on. But I don't know if it's going to be that easy or not.
Yeah, this it feels akin to me, if you're a fan of football, basketball, baseball,
Right.
whenever their labor rights come up and you have
Yep.
to sign a new CBA as they call them
Mm-hmm.
um, between the players and the owners. And you always if you're a fan of those sports, you're like, man, we've seen strikes in those sports and it just, ruins things and everything else. And I don't know that we would be anywhere near a strike necessarily. But I mean, we've heard some talk about some team
Mm-hmm.
owners saying, what can we do? We might do some things where we keep guys off the track and that kind of thing. So yes, labor peace in the ball sports. This is the equivalent of labor peace in NASCAR because what it does is if this is true, and we're going to get some news on this week, which would be great news for NASCAR fans. It just means, all right, now we don't have to worry about any of that off the track stuff. We can just put
Right.
our focus back on the track and watching the guys drive around.
Yeah, and I think probably the most outspoken opponent about this whole thing has been Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin's kind of taken up the mantra, so to speak, and kind of leading the teams into this battle and so forth. But I wonder sometimes how much it is all mouth from Denny Hamlin about some things going into this. And, is he looking at his pocketbook? Is he looking at what truly is going to be for his pocketbook? And, I know that, you got to have peace at some time, one or the other with both sides in this. But let's just say it this way. It's not going to happen. We're not going to see a union. I can tell you that much right now. We're not going to see a union coming out of NASCAR. That much of Big Bill France is probably stuck with the sport. I don't see that happening at all. Although they have rumored that they'd like to start something. I don't foresee this happening. But yeah, they need this. They need this right now, and we still need to address the situation with the teams. That's where this money NASCAR is getting, and I have to say this: NASCAR is getting semi tractor trailer loads of money coming in from the networks. That's what they're getting. This new agreement. It's so much, in fact, that NBC is now going and doing away with their Xfinity coverage for the rest of the year. They're going to be going and picking up coverage at Bristol when they come up, this year, and they'll be taking everybody into the playoffs. So they're getting money. The question is, how do the teams get the money? The teams deserve a little bit of money. And, it's almost reminiscent, too, of the big brouhaha that happened over the weekend concerning Oklahoma State. And, I'm not a big Mike Gundy fan. I think Mike Gundy's probably got a hairstyle that's probably about 30 years out of whack from the way everything else
And
is.
it wasn't even good then.
It wasn't even good then. It looks even more hideous now.
Yeah.
It looks like it's been um, I don't know, and I don't mean this bad. I know you and Crystal are dog lovers and everything else, but it looks like a stray poodle that's been brought off the street and redone and then put on top of his head, to give him a headpiece. I mean, he just doesn't look good in it. But the thing that I was going to talk about was the QR codes on the helmets. I thought it was a great idea what they wanted to do. The QR codes would be available on the helmets, and then the teams wanted to go, and if somebody wanted to go and purchase something, merchandise, whatever it might be, or get involved, something, it would be a great way. But I think it was mostly in support of Oklahoma State athletics
Yeah.
to give to that fund was what it was. And
NIL
out of
fund,
the
yeah.
blue, the NCAA lays the hammer down and says, "Nope, can't do that." So, okay, well, how are we supposed to go and do something in this when you had your hand forced in this whole situation? How are we supposed to go and raise money when it doesn't meet your specifications as to what you want?
Yeah, I mean, the we've talked about this on the podcast, and for those who maybe you don't remember or didn't hear one of those, I mean, we I've quoted from a story about NASCAR finances. Essentially, it's around $40 million to put a
Mm-hmm.
car on the track and run it for a season.
Yep.
80 to 90% of that money is money that the teams have to go out and get sponsorships for. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
NASCAR pays very little to the team. They share very little of the money that the NASCAR as an organization gets in from TV and from ticket sales with the actual teams who are out there, putting $40 million per car. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's that's not that's not per team, that's per car. So if you run three or four cars, 40 million times, whatever that is, and you're having to go out and raise all this money through sponsorships. And yeah, all they're asking for, all the team owners are asking for is share some of that big money with us. It's not like anybody really makes money at this. I mean, the only
Right.
people who make money at NASCAR are the NASCAR organization, privately owned by the family there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yep.
the drivers. I mean, and the
Mm-hmm.
employees, the crew and that kind of thing. But the team owners don't make any money. They're just trying not to lose money
Right.
and not lose lots of money by putting these things on. So, I mean, this is an existential question for NASCAR. Michael Jordan brought this up, and that's where this
Mm-hmm.
whole discussion started when we were talking about this months ago. If if NASCAR doesn't want to share money with us, what happens if the teams just fold up and then we see Stuart Haas
Mm-hmm.
going away, as you mentioned, earlier when talking about Chase Briscoe. So, I mean, if these teams decide, you know what, I mean, we're not making any money doing this, we're going to start, just not doing this anymore. Then there's no NASCAR. That's
Right.
the hard question here.
Yeah, and I mean this concerns me. This whole money thing about it. I'm kind of for the fair share about this stuff. I saw a podcast over the weekend of a racer that I can't remember his name right offhand, but he was talking with someone about the fact of how do you go and save money in the sport. And the thing that surprised me was his reaction. Somebody asked him, said, "How do you save money in the sport?" He says, "You do it the same way that we used to do it each and every weekend. We tried to avoid a wreck. We tried to avoid anything from happening. We took care of our stuff. We took care of our equipment and different things like that." He says, "But now you've got a bunch of young drivers that want to get out there on the track, and just because somebody pissed them off the wrong way, they want to go and they want to run them down, blow the car up. They want to ram the car, destroy the car, whatever it is. And then they simply walk away. They don't have anything to do with it. They don't have the connection to the crew and to the ownership, per se, of saying, hey, look, you cost us a $1 million race car, this past weekend. Don't you think that you should at least take care of the equipment? You are running for this organization." And I thought, that's probably the best way I've ever heard it. We've got a bunch of young drivers, and I don't fault young drivers. I think it's great that we've got young drivers in the sport. That's the future. But these guys have not gone through the same thing that some of these drivers week in and week out on the weekly series. And as well as I do, that's In some places, that's bread and butter for some of these places. And in order for them to stay open, they've got to have some of these cars coming back week after week. If they're going to a track and they've got the reputation there at that track of being a demolition derby, sooner or later those cars are not going to want to come back. And then who does it end up hurting? The home track is what it ends up hurting. So there's a lot of tangibles right there with that. But that's one of the best examples I think I've heard all year from one of the old racers who just simply said, "Hey, look, why don't you take care of your equipment instead of wrecking it every week and then costing us money?" So that's my take on it.
Well, but my family ties to local racing here just locally in Augusta County.
Hmm.
No, it didn't seem like anybody that was racing at the track here just outside of Waynesboro, they're not making any money either.
No,
They're having fun. I mean, and they spend money and they put money in their cars and they have nice trailers driving them around as they put more money into it, but they're also trying not to lose money.
right.
That's from the ground level all the way up to the top. And I think if it's been a while since I reported on the local racing scene, but my guess would be that the same issues at NASCAR right now we're talking about with NASCAR not sharing the money with the teams.
Hmm.
You would have your local teams at your local track saying, and that owner there, or the guy who owns the track, he don't share anything with us either.
Yeah, look at this measly pot that we got for winning this race here about 2 weeks ago and
Yeah,
stuff. I
yeah,
thought that was supposed to be big money. That won't
yeah.
even buy us a shock absorber or whatever it might be. I mean,
Look at all
that
those
may be what it said.
Look at all those people sitting out there in the stands every week, and
Right.
look at what little bit of money we get back in return. So they're not doing it for the money. I mean,
No.
the teams aren't doing it at the local level. They're doing it because they love racing. They're gearheads, and they want to get out there and and prove that they want to be the best and that kind of thing. And I think that goes all the way to the top. And NASCAR just needs to share a little bit more of the money. That's
Yep.
that's just what it is, and it would be great if they would. And they're not going. They're whatever they announce on Friday, it's not going to be what it should be, but at least it'll be
Right.
something.
Yeah, well, and here's another comparison here too. And I don't know if we can compare this in a way of apples and apples or apples to oranges, but what about Major League Baseball? The NFL? We're in the same kind of situation with this too. I know I've heard after the big announcement that the Speedway series was going to take place in Bristol next year between Cincinnati and Atlanta, some of the comments that people put online were just simply put, yeah, Bristol's lost its luster. Bristol's done this, Bristol's done that. Now they got to bring a baseball game in, and they're going to lose money on that too. Yeah, I agree with you. It's going to be one of those things they're going to lose money on, which in fact, Steve Phelps went back and he said something this past week also that they lost just about their shirt and everything with the LA Coliseum. Well, if they knew that was going to happen, why did they do it in the first place? They were hoping to get more people to come in at the Coliseum and watch the Busch Clash, and they did get some good crowds. But what it costs nowadays to put on some kind of event like this, you've got to hope for some kind of at least minimal return off of it. I know people complain about at the tracks, they complain about the food, they complain about the high price on food. You don't get enough with the food and so forth. Yeah, nobody's going to be happy out of this. Let's just put it that way. The fans, they may be satisfied for a little while, but they're going to be back to the same thing too. They're going to be, bitching about the food. They're going to be bitching about, oh, the not enough people. Well, Bristol, you might as well just close it down, or you might as well close Daytona down. That's nothing but a demolition derby. No, folks, we can't do it that way. I mean, we're trying to make it entertainment. That's what it's supposed to be. But, all parties need to be kind of, I think, fairly compensated to some degree or another if they're going to go and be a part of this empire, if you want to call it, of an entertainment empire. I mean, hey, we could throw the same thing out about World Wrestling. I mean, it's the same thing there and stuff. I mean, how many of these guys are going to live a lavish lifestyle after they get out of the sport and so forth? Some are just so crippled up and can't do anything else, and they're the ones that I feel sorry for out of this, reaping the money and the benefits out of it.
The a big difference with the ball sports, the ones
Hmm.
that the basketball, baseball, football, hockey, and the hockey's the fourth, distant fourth, but it still has a
Hmm.
union that negotiates a collective bargaining agreement. Those sports, the leagues actually end up paying over 50%, somewhere between 53 and 57%, depending on the league,
Hmm.
of league revenues out in salaries.
Hmm.
The NASCAR, I think what we've read about this agreement that has been in the works for a while that maybe will be announced on Friday would get what NASCAR pays back to the team owners up to 25%.
Yeah.
So,
Hmm.
and then you mentioned, WWE. I'll even throw in UFC.
Yep.
Two other sports or something like sports that don't have collective bargaining agreements between the owners and the performers. Those, the estimates of what is paid out from the money collected by both WWE and UFC to the wrestlers is
Hmm.
somewhere between 15 and 20%. So,
Yep.
you know, so it's, I mean, NASCAR has Southern roots. For some reason, Southern folks don't like unions. They
Yep.
don't like collective bargaining, but you know what? It works.
It works. You got to have it, to one degree. And I'm not, I'm, I hope I don't lose anybody watching this and so forth. But I mean, hey, I was raised in a union household. That's
Yeah,
the way I
yeah.
was. I was brought up in a union household, and I was told the union's on your side, but you can only go so far with that being on your side about certain things. It may appeal to some people, but there's other people that's off to the side, and they're kind of looking at it and they're saying, union doesn't represent what I represent. Why are they going and telling me I need to vote for so and so when I know who I need to go and vote? I mean, it's that typical political, sort of scenario that gets thrown in. God, I can remember, the PACs being brought up and my parents getting the letters and stuff of here's who you need to vote for. And I can remember my mom, who was brought up union as well, she threw a fit every time she got one of those mailers in the mail saying you need to vote for this person. And she's like, I went to school, I don't need any help voting on or selecting somebody to vote for and so forth. And I mean, it's just, it's that thing about unions, I guess, like you just said. It's kind of weird, but it's necessary in a lot of ways.
Hey, I saw a meme the other day. If you like working, if you like the 5-day work week, if you
Yep.
like 40 hours, if you like vacation time, thank a union for
That's exactly
making
right.
that possible, right?
That's
I mean, my
right.
my dad worked at a local plant when I was growing up, and they had a union, so it is what it is. If you like,
Yep.
if you don't want to work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, thank your union for that. For getting the laws passed in that respect. But that's getting back to NASCAR. I think it's a cultural thing as much as anything
Hmm.
else. And wrestling has a similar, the fans of that tend to be, probably skew more conservative, certainly UFC as well. So, but the athletes in those sports and the team owners in NASCAR suffer
Hmm.
because of that cultural opposition to something that would just make sense. It's just, why should the France family, why should the McMahon family, now who doesn't own WWE anymore? They sold
Hmm.
it to a big Hollywood conglomerate, but for all those years they did. UFC is privately owned by the Fertitta brothers.
Hmm.
Why should they make all the money when okay, it's the teams out there putting cars on the track and the drivers and the crews and the engineers and everything else, or it's the wrestlers, or it's the MMA fighters. They're doing all the work. Although all the people who
Right.
are collecting all the money are doing is hyping it up a little bit.
Yeah.
They
We could
make, yeah,
all,
but they make all the money.
yeah, and we could also use this example too. I mean, talking about I read the article too about the UVA game. And I mean, I think official attendance, or at least, was released of 40 some thousand.
Yeah,
But
40,000 right now. Yeah,
you couldn't prove that by seeing the people in the seats and the empty spaces all around them and everything.
yeah.
And it's like, okay, what does the university need to do to bring people out to a football game? Well, I think it was put very wisely by you in the article and stuff. It's a Carla Williams thing.
Yeah.
It's the same thing like it is with NASCAR. It's a NASCAR thing. It's an owner thing. It's everything needs to be looked at a perspective of what's going on about this about the sport or sports and what we're investing or putting our investment in.
if the butts aren't in the seats, you got to figure out why and figure out things to do to get them in the seats. And that,
That's right.
you wrote the article last week about Mexico City, and as a result, meaning Richmond doesn't get, one of its
Hmm.
races that it's always gotten. It gets one race next year instead of two. And a lot of the local coverage of that was, and you wrote about this too, because Richmond hasn't been drawing
Yep.
for years. And okay, so instead of complaining, oh, we lost our race, why not figure out why we're not getting people to come to the race? So,
Right.
but no, they don't do that. And then, sitting back, it's TV money now and this, that, and the
Hmm.
other. I mean, money makes the world go round. If you want to have a sport, we can talk about the ideals all we want, but it takes money to put those cars on the track.
Hmm.
It takes money to, honestly, it takes marketing money to get people in the seats. And for those of us who love NASCAR, who love college football, who love wrestling or baseball or whatever
Hmm.
else, it takes money to make money. So.
I said in the Big Kennedy press conference last week after they made the announcement about Mexico City, and there was a Richmond TV reporter, and I kind of, I don't know, batting down the hatches and getting ready to find out what kind of, question he was going to fire off. And he fired off just a simple question. It was, why? Why did you give up Richmond? Why did you give it up? That was two dates. Those were two guaranteed dates. And Big Kennedy said, well, it's just not been, we're going to give them one race. We're going to keep one race there and so forth. We're going to make it a night race. And we're going to make that something that the fans can, but it's going to have to be ultimately left up to the fans. If they want another race at Richmond, they're going to have to get it. But so many people, gosh, the reaction to that losing that Richmond race was, how dare you? How dare you go and snub us this way and stuff? And how many millions of dollars does it bring in? There's the money. There it is. That's the whole equivalent, the answer right there. Money. How much money do you really bring in when you bring the NASCAR circus to town? It's the same way with, they were talking too, I think next year on the schedule in 2025, there's going to be a NASCAR race at, I believe, Sears Point. And then the next following week, the NHRA is going to be there. So they're going to be stocking up, making some money out there, out in California, out there in the wine country. And they've got two events back to back, and people love racing out there in the northern part of, California. And we're still trying to figure out, are we going to have a racetrack, or are we going to have a race in Southern California now that the Busch Clash is gone? Auto Club Speedway, from what I've read, the whole thing, it's been closed up. It's stopped. There's nothing going on about it. And now NASCAR's looking at San Diego as a possibility of a street race. So a lot of things could change between now and 2026 when they get their new schedule put together.
Well, great discussion for the listeners out there, viewers on YouTube. Keep up with Augusta Free Press. We'll keep you up to date on the latest in NASCAR auto racing in general, and of course the race this weekend, the first playoff race.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have all the coverage there as well. Well, Rod, as always, thank you for your time and your insight.
Appreciate it, Chris. Thanks.